I want to share some new information with you that sheds light on potential career issues that Michael McKee was having in the months leading up to the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe. The vascular surgeon is now in custody, and he is accused of shooting and killing his ex-wife and her husband inside their Columbus home on December 30th. And we have documents that show in the months leading up to those murders, people were searching for Michael McKee, and it was in connection to a malpractice lawsuit out of Las Vegas. I'm going to show you these documents and we'll look at what they tell us about a potentially disturbing part of McKee's past. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Michael McKee went to school for roughly 15 years to become a vascular surgeon. But now, he's really known more as an alleged killer than anything he did with a patient in his medical career. But it doesn't appear that McKee's medical career that he worked so hard for was unblemished, let's say, because I have documents related to a lawsuit where McKee is a defendant. It's a malpractice lawsuit that was filed in Las Vegas. McKee used to work for a surgical group in Nevada. And what we're talking about today and why I think it is important when it comes to looking at what he's accused of in Ohio, it's not necessarily the lawsuit itself as it is how it appears that he may have gone about it by potentially lying and potentially running away. Now, I'll talk more about all of this in just a moment, but we also have some new information that came in from police. Now, they're not commenting on a motive at this point, but in a news conference yesterday, and it may seem like it's obvious to the public, but I think it's a big deal that police said it this way. They do consider what happened to Spencer and Monique Tepe as an act of domestic violence. Now, McKee, of course, was once married to Monique Tepe. Her maiden name is Sabatursky, and this is a picture of Michael McKee and Monique on their wedding day. They were married in 2015, and they divorced pretty quickly after. It was filed in 2017, and after their divorce, it does appear that Monique went her way and McKee went his way. Now, police in Columbus, they're not talking about what, if any, type of contact that McKee had with the Tepes following that divorce. Now, Monique filed for divorce in May of 2017, and we have the court records that show that she had left Michael McKee at least 6 months prior to her filing for divorce, because this divorce was filed in court in Ohio, and that is where she was living for at least 6 months prior to filing for divorce. Now, as for McKee, he was still in Roanoke, Virginia. So when we look at McKee's past, when it comes to his academic background, which frankly is very impressive, to go on to become a vascular surgeon, there's no denying that. He goes to Ohio State, he graduates from med school there in 2014, and then he marries Monique, and the two of them move to Virginia, and that's where he continues his training to become a surgeon with a residency. He lived in Virginia from 2015 to 2020. He graduates from this residency in Virginia in 2020. And when it comes to his personal life and this divorce, on paper, it seems like it was a pretty amicable divorce. And I think of the days after Monique and Spencer were killed, and there was this question of who would have done this. And because of public records, it was pretty quick that people zoned in on the fact that Monique had been married before, but her ex-husband was someone who lived out of state. He was a surgeon. Police had said they didn't have any suspects at that point. And so, yes, we knew that she had been married, but in terms of there being a lot of speculation about him being a suspect, there was nothing publicly that had pointed to that, at least up until the weekend when Michael McKee was arrested. Now, going back to that divorce, before we get to this malpractice lawsuit, in 2017, Monique files for divorce, and it's a month and a half later that a judge grants her the divorce on the grounds of incompatibility. Now, McKee, he got to keep the house in Virginia. Monique was back in Ohio, and she moves on with her life. And it seems like she recovered incredibly well from this divorce because she meets someone online named Spencer. He's a dentist, and they end up getting married in late 2020, and they go on to build this great life. She has 2 kids with Spencer Tepe. Of course, their ages 4 and 1 years old. And yes, they were inside the house the night that their parents were killed, and those kids are now in the care of family members. Monique She had a degree in early childhood education from Ohio State, but she was a stay-at-home mom. And it seems like the Tepes were living the dream. They had this great house in Columbus as well. Now, as she's moving on with her life, you have Michael McKee, and he continues his professional training to become a surgeon, because when you're done with a residency, then you go on to even more schooling of some kind, because it is being reported that he took a fellowship position at this medical center in Maryland. And right now we know that he has active licenses to be a surgeon in California and Illinois, and that's the state where he was living at the time of his arrest and where he was arrested over the weekend. Now, McKee's journey, as we focus on that, he also makes a stop in Las Vegas. And that's where he worked for a surgical group that was called Las Vegas Surgical Associates. Now, this group says it offers a wide range of procedures. So if you have an issue, you go to them, and then they have the surgeons that are able to do the procedure for you. And what we're talking about today with this malpractice lawsuit, this is all related to something that happened in Las Vegas, and it's related to a procedure that was done on a patient in 2023. And we have the documents that are related to this lawsuit. And we'll walk through like what the lawsuit is about, but really the important part of this story, and again, why we think it's important when it comes to the context of what was going on in Michael McKee's life in the months leading up to the murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe, is how it appears he responded to it when the court tried to find him. Now, the lawsuit is still active, and it was first filed in May of 2024. And this is a paragraph where you can see right there the name Dr. Michael David McKee mentioned as a defendant. This lawsuit claims that a man went to get a procedure in July of 2023 at Las Vegas Medical Associates. And the suit claims the man had a medical condition where the veins in his legs have trouble pumping blood back to his heart. The condition's called lower extremity venous insufficiency. And the suit claims that a physician's assistant who worked under Michael McKee allegedly performed part of the procedure. And the PA allegedly, according to this lawsuit, put a catheter, and that's the tube that's often used to drain urine. She puts the catheter into the patient. And the lawsuit claims that the catheter was not put in correctly. And because of that, it broke and it left an 8.6-inch portion in the patient's body. It sounds incredibly uncomfortable. And this lawsuit names Dr. Michael McKee because he allegedly was responsible for training the PA who put in that device. And he allegedly didn't train that PA or train them very well, according to this lawsuit. So now we have the background of why Dr. McKee was named in this malpractice lawsuit. So let's talk about where things, according to these court documents, get pretty sketchy. So this is the document that lays out the attempts that the court made to serve Dr. McKee with an amended complaint, where someone has to physically go and hand it to him. And we have records that show that the people who were tasked with finding Dr. Michael McKee couldn't do it. After 9 attempts, it's like he just vanished, according to these court records. Now, starting in September of 2025, so roughly 3 months before McKee allegedly killed Monique and Spencer Tepe, there was this first attempt that was made by someone trying to serve Dr. Michael McKee. On September 30th, which is exactly 3 months before Spencer and Monique were killed, the person trying to serve the paperwork says he went to the address that was listed for McKee in Las Vegas, and there was no answer, and it was all quiet. This happened around 7:30 in the morning. So then the next day, the person returns around 10:45 in the morning, same address, and this time it appears someone is home. They write, quote, "Heard TV. When I knocked, the TV was shut off. I rang the bell and knocked several times with no response." So 8 days after that, we're at October 9th. An entry reads that they spoke with someone named Dr. Peter Caravella at Las Vegas Surgical Associates. Quote, "He said he has no idea where Dr. Michael McKee is now. Said he just disappeared." Now, when you look at that, we're not talking about someone who's like a small-time doctor. This is someone who is a vascular surgeon. He's not just some small-time employee that just disappeared. This was a main figure at this practice. And according to the people at the practice where he was working, he was just gone. Now, later that day, the person who's trying to serve Dr. McKee goes back to the address that was given to him and the one that was connected to McKee. And once again, there was no answer. Nobody was home. And the person also writes that they found out that McKee's medical license in Nevada expired in June of 2025. The document states that they kept searching. and they found another address in Las Vegas. But when they went to that house in October on the 20th, the woman who answered the door said McKee didn't live there and she didn't know who he was. So WSYX TV, which is one of the TV stations in Columbus, they actually interviewed the attorney who filed this lawsuit, who said that the address that the surgical group gave them for Michael McKee, it was, quote, a fake address. He also said, when you think of who could be accused of a double murder, and this is a lawyer who files malpractice lawsuits, so he knows the medical profession. He says professionally, a vascular surgeon is at the bottom of the list of people who you would suspect would be accused of such a horrific crime. And he said having a situation where they are potentially giving a fake address and hiding from being served, it's just very unusual. Now, we know after Las Vegas, McKee moved to Illinois, and the address that's listed on his arrest documents is for this ritzy condo building in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. And we spoke to one of his neighbors earlier this week. She took these videos of police when they were at her building following McKee's arrest over the weekend. And that neighbor told us that McKee, he was often alone. She met him last summer for the first time on the building's pool deck. And she said that he was pleasant, but again, he was often alone. And it's certainly just shocking to everybody who lives in that building that now someone who lived amongst them, alongside them, would be accused of such a terrible crime. Now, this week, Columbus police said they found multiple weapons in the apartment in Chicago where McKee lived, and one of them may be the murder weapon.
This was a domestic violence related attack. As we know, McKee is the ex-husband of Monique Tepe. We can say that we have the suspect's vehicle on neighborhood video surveillance arriving just before the murders and leaving shortly after. Detectives were able to link this vehicle to McKee. The vehicle was located in Rockford, Illinois, and evidence was found that showed McKee in possession of the vehicle before and after the homicides. We can also say that multiple weapons were taken from the property of McKee, and there is a preliminary link from our NIBIN to one of the weapons that ties it to the homicides.
So this is part of our interview with McKee's former neighbor who gave us the videos of the building and inside the building where they had a police officer parked 24 hours a day for a period of time outside his unit on the 12th floor. And this is just what she said stood out to her about him now in hindsight.
I knew Michael McKee because here at the Pierre, we have a pool and we have a barbecue pit upstairs. And last summer, I met him. He was a new resident. And I introduced myself to him, and he was a very pleasant man. We didn't discuss about jobs or anything like that. I just told him about the building and how nice it was, and welcome to the Pierre. And the Air and Water Show is the best place to see it in the city because they come right in front of us. And it was just very nice, very pleasant. And we would pass each other, coming into the building and the elevator, and I even forgot his name, I'll be honest. And I would say hi, and he'd say hi, and I'd say, wow, we're tired, long day. And he'd, yep, long day. We never had any other conversations after that.
So McKee lives in Chicago, but it seems like he had a pretty good commute. He worked at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center in Rockford, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half west of Chicago. Police said that ATF agents arrested McKee not far from his place of employment last week. And then he is booked into jail in Rockford just after midnight on Saturday, according to county jail court records in Rockford, Illinois. At this first court appearance, McKee waived his right to an extradition hearing, and Columbus police say they're currently in the process of working out the logistics to bring him back to Ohio to face those charges of aggravated murder for what he allegedly did to his ex-wife and her new husband. Now, police have confirmed that the person of interest who you see here, remember that video of the person just walking down the back alley behind the Tepe's home around the time that they were killed? He's wearing dark clothing. He has a hood. He's not looking at the cameras that are mounted on the back of some of the homes pointed in that alleyway. Police have confirmed that they believe that that is McKee. And that video played a key role in his arrest. They say they tracked him with video surveillance cameras on the night of the murders to a car that then drove back to Illinois. And they say that car is registered to Michael McKee. That is something that is incredibly disturbing if that is true. Now, turning back to the malpractice lawsuit, it's certainly a red flag. Vanishing from your surgical practice months before you allegedly kill your ex-wife and her husband. It's just something that's really hard to comprehend. And one thing that we're working on right now here at Law and Crime is just trying to learn more about McKee's past. And there are a lot of rumors on the internet right now about who Michael McKee is and who he was. I talked to somebody who knew him in his hometown of Zanesville, Ohio, place about an hour east of Columbus, where he went to college. It's a town of like 25,000 people, small town feel. And the people I spoke to said he was incredibly smart, and on paper, he was very accomplished. The Zanesville Times-Recorder is the local paper there in that town. And it actually has an article back in 1994 when McKee was in first grade, and he got an honorable mention in a kids poster contest that's run by Ohio's Secretary of State. Then when he's 13 years old, that same newspaper has McKee mentioned again. And this time it's for an excellent rating at a state science day. He's 14 now, mentioned again in this newspaper, and he won the city spelling bee. His word was siege. Siege. He then goes on to graduate high school, and he's at the top of his class. And this is where the people who I spoke to knew him from just said he was incredibly smart. He was a National Merit Scholar. He was a biology student of the year, according to the newspaper, and a member of the National Honor Society. And he placed in the top 25 at Ohio University's American History Contest. Not to mention that on the field, he was all honorable mention All-State for football. So you have someone, if you were looking at his LinkedIn profile, it's just checking the box one after another that he's incredibly impressive. But the question then becomes, what was going on in his personal life? What was his state of mind? There's still not a lot that we know, or at least confirmed at this point. We know he goes on to college at Ohio State, then goes to school for roughly 15 years to become a vascular surgeon. And again, that is where you're focusing on like arteries, veins, vessels. It is a type of surgery where you have to be incredibly precise and you have to work so hard to actually get that career. So there's no doubt that this was a man who was incredibly book smart, but he was also a husband in a marriage that failed very quickly. And this is what Spencer Tepe's brother-in-law said about him earlier this week to my colleague Anjanette Levy on Law and Crime.
For us, we met Monique in 2018 when Spencer first introduced her to us. But we were fairly certain because of just what Monique had told us stories-wise of her. She never called him by name. She would just call him her ex-husband, and just how much of a monster he was, to be honest. Emotionally abusive and threatening. And, she did everything she could to extricate herself from that situation. And, met Spencer and lived a very happy life. But I can't speak for Monique, but I know that it changed her as a person. And perhaps it was always in the back of her mind. I don't know. She wasn't shy about talking about it, and how it had impacted her kind of mentally just as a person going forward. So we had all heard stories and had talked to her deeply about these situations, but at the same time, we were all thinking this is something in the past. And Monique is clearly happy right now and has a family and is with the person that she loves. So. Mm-hmm. While we were aware of it, we were also more awestruck by the couple themselves and how much they were in love.
So it's been hard to, again, find people who consider themselves friends of McKee in recent years. There's a lot of rumors out there about his upbringing in Zanesville, and we're still working to confirm a lot of that. But it does appear that he left Zanesville behind and he never really came back. As far as family goes, the only comment of any kind we have publicly about family is this Facebook post that was made by someone who said he is family of Michael McKee. This post has since been deleted. We're going to protect their identity. The post reads, quote, "I would like to ask for prayers. Michael is actually a family member. My heart stopped when I read this. When we were growing up, I was always amazed by his kindness and how gifted he was in sports and academics. This is totally out of character for him. All parties definitely need our prayers. Such a sad situation. It makes me sad to think what kind of headspace he was in if he did this. My heart goes out to him. It is definitely a dark world out there right now, and one of us could be victim to the dark side. So please stick close to God and a few people you can trust. Keep moving towards the light. God will not fail us. Now, we've reached out to this person. They have yet to return our calls or get back to us. We're trying to understand how their family with Michael McKee and what his family dynamic was like. But when you look at the lives that Michael McKee lived and Monique Tepe lived following their divorces, it does seem that Monique's life, it was one where she was surrounded by people who loved her. She loved a lot of people. They were described as the life of the party. Rob Misla, who is Spencer Tepe's brother-in-law, who spoke to Anjanette earlier this week, he speaks so positively about this couple and the joy that they brought to people in the years that they were together. And then you look at McKee's life, and to this point, it appears that it was one that was very much focused on his profession. It seems like he was isolated, almost lived a nomadic life when you think of the places that he went to, and he worked really hard for his career. But then you look at this malpractice lawsuit, and allegedly it was not unblemished. Now, McKee's public defender told the local newspaper in Rockford, Illinois, after his first court appearance that she does expect Michael McKee to plead not guilty when he is arraigned on charges in Ohio, and we are waiting at the time of this recording for him to return to Ohio to face charges. Joining us now is Patrick Provenzal, trial attorney. Thank you for being with us once again here on Law and Crime as we continue to make sense of the many layers to this story. We're talking about this malpractice suit out of Las Vegas. How serious, like when you read through the documents, like how serious in terms of malpractice lawsuits that a surgeon could be named in? I mean, how serious was this one?
Well, I mean, it's serious to the victim, of course, because the patient, because an instrument was left in them that resulted in some very severe complications. Unfortunately, in terms of the prevalence or frequency of these kinds of things, it happen far more often than anyone would like, but that you would really think. You can look at the statute in Nevada that actually allows for these types of lawsuits without what almost always is otherwise required, where you have a physician who practices in the same area of medicine as the doctor in the case, who's read the records and then says, yes, there was a malpractice or there was a breach of the standard of care in relation to the manner in which the patient was harmed. Here in this instance, where a lot of times surgeons leave sponges or instruments or other things. This one just broke off, which would really suggest some real mistake that was made during the course of this procedure. It's the exception to the general rule where you would need a doctor to say, yeah, that was malpractice or is negligent. In Nevada, apparently that's not even required for this type of circumstance.
Because when you look at Michael McKee, and just from what we've been able to learn about him, clearly he's accused of a terrible, terrible crime. But professionally, it just stands out to me that this is someone who, good student, was like a good athlete in high school, goes on and like to become a surgeon is a lot of school, a lot of work, and you probably have to pass a lot of bars. They're not letting everybody be a vascular surgeon. And so there's probably a level of trust. And then you see, for as strong as his career was, like here's this lawsuit a couple months before. We don't know if there's any connection or whether it impacted his mind, but it certainly was in 3 months before this all happened in Columbus. How much of a problem would it be for a surgeon's career to be named in a lawsuit like this?
Well, I mean, it's always a problem.
Right.
Oftentimes when, I guess it's how high profile is the case. Oftentimes these things are under the radar to the general patient population of a hospital or of a doctor's practice. And really the only way that patients ever find out about these kinds of things is to look onto the medical board listings on the state websites to see if malpractice claims have been filed or settled, or if a physician's ever been disciplined in relation to some mistake or malpractice in the way that they took care of a patient. But in general, these are common in the overall scheme of medical practice. Doctors are human, like anyone else, and they do make mistakes no matter how smart, how credentialed they are. Obviously, in a case like this, it's a very obvious and apparent one. But I don't think most people have the motive, much less the knowledge to know where to look and to look and see, has their doctor ever had anything like this happen? But unfortunately, these things do happen quite frequently.
And it's important to know, like, he wasn't the one, according to this lawsuit, who allegedly put the catheter in allegedly incorrectly. It's the PA
Right.
that did, according to the
Right.
suit, and then he was in charge of training that PA, or the suit alleges that he was responsible for
Right.
that. So that's how he got brought into this. Now, it does seem like it's uncommon for the things that were listed as far as trying to get in touch with him and to serve him this complaint. And the part that stood out to me wasn't just that you had the knock at the door, the TV turns off and nobody knows where he is, but it was talking to another doctor who said, we haven't seen the guy. Like, we don't know where he went. And it's like, he's not, not that it would be okay if like a small time nurse did it, but like, this is a surgeon that just seemed to vanish to the people in Vegas. What did you like? How common is that when you look at these cases?
Not common at all. I mean, there's so much that's really unusual about this particular lawsuit just all by itself. And then you throw in the apparent connection of this gentleman to the allegations of the double homicide in Ohio. I suppose it makes sense why he disappeared if they're related. But you have a whole series of things here that just are very unusual for any practicing physician. His people in his own practice don't know where he's at. He didn't apparently have malpractice insurance in Nevada. I know when they tried, when the plaintiff's lawyer in that case had filed suit, I saw a comment, and I would have certainly under the same circumstances expected to have received some information from the insurance company for that doctor who provides his malpractice insurance, and his affiliation with a local hospital or clinic or whatever it was that he was acting as the supervising physician for the physician's assistant who was doing the procedure when the piece of the instrument broke off, and someone should have known in the normal circumstance where the doctor is, who credentials him, where does he have privileges to practice in terms of hospitals and clinics, and then insurance companies who are insuring them, because doctors are supposed to have malpractice insurance. And for all of those things to not be true in this case, where no one knows where he's at, he's not insured, and he's giving fake addresses, really, really, really unusual, particularly for someone who's in the prime of his career. I mean, an older physician who's on the verge of retirement, maybe that's understandable, but you've got a physician in the prime of his career. He's got patients. Even if he were to stop practicing, he would still need to be in contact with his colleagues about continuity of care for the patients that he has. All of those things, for him to just so abruptly and without any real knowledge by anyone in his circles to know where he's at or what he's doing, is really, really unusual for a cardiovascular surgeon.
Yeah, and it's, these attempts to get in touch with him were in September of this year. In fact, the first one, I believe, was September 30th, which is exactly 3 months before the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe. We know after he left, or at least we believe from what we've been able to piece together, that he was living in Illinois at the time that these murders happened. He was living in this nice apartment building in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And then he's working at this medical center for a healthcare group in Rockford, Illinois. Would something like malpractice, being named in a malpractice lawsuit, or just the issues that the company that was trying to serve him was having, like all of those things, would that be a red flag? And I know that OSF St. Anthony, that group, has released a statement saying they're cooperating with law enforcement, but would that be something that would come up in the hiring process for a surgeon for a large hospital system if they were kind of having this very controversial exit from this group out in Vegas?
It should. Like any circumstance where someone's going to hire someone, especially a professional who's going to be charged with the care of the health and well-being of patients, there should be adequate vetting to determine: have you been sued before? Are there pending lawsuits against you? Are you insured personally, or do you have a practice that you've worked for that you have been insured by? Do you have privileges at other hospitals or healthcare facilities, so that we can verify the fact that you're in good standing and that you are recognized by colleagues and accrediting associations as being a competent, qualified physician? Those are really paramount for any healthcare organization when they're hiring someone, to make sure that they know who they're hiring, and that they're qualified in both competency and character to do the job.
Now, when it comes to just, because you have this part of it, which it's interesting because he, as far as everything we know about him and what's been reported, is like he was, again, like this stellar student, like going on up, and then all the work that goes into actually becoming a surgeon. I mean, it's the residency, it's the fellowship, and then eventually you're like in your 30s when you're actually a surgeon, and it takes so much schooling. But then it's like you read this lawsuit, and it just feels, I wouldn't say out of character because I don't know the guy and he's certainly accused of a terrible crime, but it just seems it seems odd compared to everything else that he had going for him. When you look at what he's accused of, and then you have this divorce to Monique Tepe, and again, there's just not a lot that we know about his upbringing either, other than he was a really good student, people say. Like, what stands out to you about Michael McKee to this point?
It's very hard to connect the dots. I think you were talking to that. You have someone who, by all appearances, was really a stellar young man and had a bright future. And now the recent revelations and the circumstances suggest that something really, really went wrong, or there were old things in the past for him that came up that caused him what appears to be an unraveling based upon the allegations and what's known. I mean, you've got a gentleman who had a very successful career in the Chicago area and then was practicing out in Nevada. There's no explanation for that. You have a very abrupt divorce after marriage to a young lady that, by all appearances, you'd think they wouldn't be getting a divorce within a year or two after getting married when he has such a bright future. And then now, of course, the allegations of the horrific crime and the killing of those lovely couple in Ohio. There's just a real loud dissonance between what appears to be a very competent, accomplished, well-respected surgeon and what has appeared in the last 8 or 10 years of an unraveling of a marriage, some fracturing of his professional practice, and obviously now the allegations of the worst of crimes.
Yeah, and I'm not one to, try to profile him. That's not, I don't know how to profile people like they do and figure out what's in his mind. But I also think of, I mean, sadly, we see, and police called this an act of domestic violence. They haven't said anything about motive, but, we see cases of domestic violence, and it's that, the ex-husband sees the husband and wife out at an event or at a party, and then suddenly there's violence there. He's accused of driving from Illinois to Columbus to allegedly do this, and then driving back, and he's arrested in Rockford. Not like, how do you make sense of that? But it seems like the mind of someone to actually do that and to carry something out like what he's accused of after driving several hours. From a defense point of view, I mean, I don't know what his defense is going to be, but it just, the mind, how could that factor into any sort of defense for him once we see more and learn more about the case?
Well, I think you touched on it when you started, which is sort of the concept of profiling. But from the defense perspective, it's going to be not so much profiling him as what his propensities are given a certain psychology, but a real granular investigation of his psychological and psychiatric condition, that there appears to be some like circumstances that suggest he was having, in the common way we say, he snapped, that there was just something that had been brewing that caused him to really lose his clear thinking that led him to be a very successful young surgeon, that to where he is now, being in handcuffs and being extradited over to Ohio on charges of a double murder. So I think what the defense is going to do very vigorously here, and I think ultimately it may not be so much to challenge the question of whether he committed the offenses, but to really defend against the penalty here, because in Ohio, the charge of aggravated murder carries the potential for the death penalty or certainly life in prison. And putting on my prosecutor's hat and my defense attorney hat, which I've worn both of, along with being a civil attorney, I know that the likely course that this case is going to run in the defense is going to be in trying to explain away any rational motive to an irrational one, which is going to suggest not so much that it was a crime of passion, because it's going to be very hard to argue that there's some mitigation for someone acting in the heat of the moment when he's driving from Rockford or from the Chicago area to Ohio and then back. But otherwise, to say that it's a much larger sort of mental, emotional, psychological unraveling, that he was unwell or outright lacked sanity, where he could not appreciate the criminality of his conduct. It's going to be a very uphill battle from any legal defense, but certainly it will allow a lot of evidence that the defense will be able to present to the jury, who's going to make a decision about the death penalty if the prosecutor pursues it, to answer the question of whether or not, in all the circumstances and what his mental state was and what his psychological and psychiatric condition were, that it warrants executing him.
Yeah, and that's, I know we have a long way to go, but I mean, there's so many disturbing details that have come out about how he allegedly went about this. And I think too, like, I want to ask about a key piece of evidence we learned about yesterday from Columbus police. And they do believe, after searching his Chicago apartment, that they found weapons, they say, and then they called it a preliminary match to, it sounds like what they believe is the murder weapon, that he kept that in his home. I mean, for those of us on the outside who haven't tried cases, we say, well, you have the murder weapon. That's a pretty strong piece of evidence. Why specifically, if prosecutors have this murder weapon, is that something that could be incredibly damning for Michael McKee?
Well, I mean, the phrase smoking gun is not an accident, right? I mean, that's if you find the weapon in the possession of the person who is accused of the crime, and they're found to be in possession of the weapon that committed the crime, I mean, you've connected all the dots. You're going to prove your case in all likelihood. Ballistics will have to be run on the weapon, in matching whatever the bullets were that were recovered from the victims to really connect it. But, they're looking at caliber of the weapon, type of bullets that were recovered, and those things are usually enough to let you know you're on the right track. And then the remainder of the ballistics will be completed to confirm it. But having the weapon is obviously a crucial part of any case. I was thinking, because first I've heard of it from you mentioning it, that they may have located it. I had been thinking, even if they never recovered the weapon, on his route back from Ohio, would they ever find it? I mean, he could have stopped anywhere, thrown it anywhere. They would have to. The police would have to pursue a real deep and difficult job of pulling all of his location data from his phone, assuming he had it on him, find out if he ever stopped along the way, and then start doing searches in fields or in sewers or wherever you were going to look to find the most likely place across those hundreds of miles that he might have ditched a weapon in this crime. So having found it, that certainly takes a lot of load off the police for really tying and connecting him up to having committed the crime that he's accused of having committed. It also, I think, underscores the point I mentioned earlier, which is the defense of this case may not really be focused on whether he did it, but going after the trying to defend his life from and save him from execution.
And we'll see what happens. He is, it's in the process, they say they're figuring out to transport him from Illinois to Ohio, where he will face these very, very strong charges against him in a very, very tough case. Mm-hmm. Patrick Provenzal, trial attorney. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much. Take care.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.